This is episode 312 of Rogue State of Mind, formerly known as Mito Life Radio. Today I'm interviewing Tania Teschke. She is the author of a book called The Bordeaux Kitchen. And this is kind of a different episode of what I usually do. We focus more on whole food and the power of animal foods and animal organs. She talks about what it was like growing up in a German household, eating liverwurst and a lot of traditional animal foods, and then the health scare that she had with a ruptured appendix, experimenting with vegetarian diet, and then restoring her health using animal foods and specifically organ meats. I was definitely not raised on organ meats. I was raised in San Diego, Southern California, and I had a pretty traditional upbringing. You know, my parents did their best, but I definitely didn't eat any organ meats. I'd imagine that would have prevented my acne and eczema and brain fog and stunted growth and all of the things that I dealt with growing up. But, you know, we can't blame our parents. They always do their best, and they did a lot of other things right. And I think I restored myself largely over the last 15 years of going heavy with supplementation and all of the lifestyle stuff. But I asked Tania about her thoughts on powdered organ meat supplements, how to improve organ meat taste if someone didn't grow up with it, like myself, her thoughts on bone broth, on vegetables, raw milk. We talk about why she likes tallow for skincare and her skincare line. Talk a little bit about alcohol. She did a year of wine science and tasting in Bordeaux. So I ask her thoughts on different aspects of drinking wine. I also get her thoughts on cod liver oil. So it was a fun discussion. Like I said, different from my other shows. I would say it's more relaxed. She talks a lot about the philosophy of it's not just about the food, it's how you prepare it and who you share it with, which I didn't have much input because I'm pretty remote and I'm alone 99% of the time, which I love. But I understand that community is really important for a lot of people, and it's a part of healing for a lot of people. So that's great. And I still want to promote that here on my show. So enjoy. Here is Tania Teschke.
Hey, thanks, Matt. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is going to be a really fun conversation. I actually have your book here, Bordeaux Kitchen, Immersion into French food and wine inspired by ancestral traditions. And it's like a work of art. It's really clean and just nice to look at. And
Thank you.
yeah, it would be cool to talk about your philosophy around just animal foods and organ meats. And a lot of people know my history. I'm pretty open about, and a lot of people that eat animal foods now are like ex-vegans. And I tried it for a good 8 or 9 years back and forth, vegetarian, vegan, raw vegan, fruitarian, crazy things like liquidarian, doing like blue-green algae and chia seeds, just like really extreme stuff. And when I added in like just grass-fed beef and ground bison and oysters and butter and cheese and raw milk, like I remember my grades in school skyrocketed. I just felt more clear in life, more creative. I started making more money. Just everything in life got better when
Yeah.
I added in the animal kingdom. It was interesting.
Yeah. That's amazing. You're actually fortunate to have made that connection early on. It took me decades to figure that out. So yeah, I'm excited to talk about it.
Did you have a history of some of that as well, or did you ever try, you know, extreme diets, we can call them, or
Yeah. Well, so I grew up in a German household. My mom fed us really well, but it was in the U.S., so I had, junk food at arm's length, and I think I was addicted to sugar. And back in the day, before I was an athlete, and we would in high school and part of college, and we'd carbo load on pasta and that kind of thing. And then, when I went to college, there was a rupture with the food culture, food from home. Then you go and eat in the cafeteria, and I didn't know how to cook. I could make pasta, like every other college kid, and and so I became, I think, very nutrient deficient. And I remember now, when I think back, at how much brain fog I had, and a lot of fatigue. I wasn't getting sleep, no regular sleep, but I never made the connection. And then, after college, I went over to Kazakhstan. I had been doing Russian studies and French studies, and my first job out of college was in Kazakhstan, funny enough, with USAID. And it was a subcontractor to a subcontractor. Mm. But anyway, I was, I actually, in college, I became influenced by those around me about vegetarianism. I was playing ultimate frisbee, and we all had hairy legs, and I didn't know anything about cooking, but so I just went along with what people were doing, and I also kind of got tired of eating a lot of chicken. And so when I went to Kazakhstan, I was still sort of vegetarian. I didn't know how to prepare meat myself. And I did eat it now and then, but I became very malnourished there. I mean, something I noticed, and I look back on it now, this was in the mid 90s. Kazakhstan and Central Asia was getting a lot of seed oils dumped, and condiments also, the ketchup, whatever. But they didn't have olive oil. That they didn't have that for like thousands of miles. They had sunflower seed oil or whatever, dumped by, thank you, the EU or whomever. And so that's what we ate on our salads, and that's what everything was cooked in. And of course, no wonder, by the time I turned 25, I was so malnourished, and I had an appendix rupture. And I think it was from all these things. Also not getting enough sunshine, I think, even though it's sunny in Kazakhstan, but I just wasn't outside a lot. I didn't know about grounding or anything. And so I was medevaced from Kazakhstan to Germany, where I have relatives with what turned out to be a ruptured appendix. And, I really was somehow scraped up off of the floor and given a second chance, after some blood transfusions and all sorts of things. And I realized I needed to eat meat again, at the very least. And so these sort of, the transformation for me happened over many years. But when I eventually had children in my mid 30s, I realized I needed to up my game too on, feeding them well. And I also was having a lot of depression. So in 2013, we moved to Bordeaux, and it was the one place in the world I really wanted to be, but yet I felt depressed and tired. And so I started looking into, ancestral health. Thanks to David Perlmutter. That was sort of the first book and a podcast with him. And I kind of went down this rabbit hole and listened to every podcast I could find. I was trying to just learn more about health, but at the same time, I was, making friends with the French, and I really wanted to learn how to cook the French way. And anyone you ask in France, almost anyone, knows how to cook a recipe. And so I just started asking. I took some classes, some workshops in French with French chefs and other French people who just wanted to learn cooking classes. And So I was gathering recipes, and then I asked other friends, can you show me this or that? And one friend actually showed me a chicken liver recipe. So that was like my gateway to organ meats. And the nutrient density and all these things. So I, was no longer a vegetarian, and then I kind of became indoctrinated into the French way of eating.
What was that first bite of chicken liver? Like, did it feel like a light bulb going off in your brain, or was it a interesting experience to?
Well, I'm trying to think because, I guess the gateway to organ meats for me before that may have been, and I didn't, remember, was liverwurst with my German family. Okay. So, and liverwurst, the kind that I was eating is made with cream, and they probably put some sugar in. They put pork meat too, or even pork liver and calf's liver. They mix it all. It tastes so good, on bread or a cracker or something. So when I was little, my grandmother in Germany would give that to me. So I already had a taste for it. And so when my friend suggested chicken livers, I was ready. I was ready. And it tasted really good. I think we added garlic, salt and pepper, and it just was delicious. And we probably had a baguette with that as well, and maybe some wine. So, but I have to, I know I hear a lot of people say, like, they take that bite or the first bite of meat again. And I think it was a long process for me to realize, wow, this is what I need. And I started, so my girls were little then. I have two daughters in Bordeaux. They were, I don't know, 7 or 8 and 5 or something like that. And I started learning these recipes and collecting the information, taking photos of my friends. And so that became the book eventually. But I would feed the girls what I was cooking, learning to cook, like duck breast or even just a roast chicken, steak. And so now I'm very proud to say that they're teenagers and they know how to use a steak knife, and they like to eat their steak sometimes even not raw, but medium. And a lot of their friends don't even eat meat. And I just find that I wish I had known when I was a teenager, an athlete. So I'm trying to get that all back now, make up for lost time. So, yeah.
It's funny when you were talking about seed oils. Have you seen, like, on social media, I can't remember the name of that UK, was it Diary of a CEO? There's a woman on there on that UK podcast, and she was defending seed oils, saying that there's no evidence that they're harmful. And of course, there are all these rebuttal videos that came. But it's funny that we always look for research first, where for me, it should be like anecdotes and personal experience. And yeah, there's placebo effect and there's possible, variables that go into that. But I would much rather, instead of going on PubMed for the truth, just look at life, look at people with me here on the mountain, look at my experience with, just for example, seed oils. And to me, there's no doubt that when I was eating a lot of those, I had a lot of acne and brain fog, like you said you were dealing with. And it's just funny to see people trying to defend these. I think that you have to approach it with the right argument. Processed isn't bad because we have to, process a lot of foods, like even acorns, amazing food I used to process. And that's a very heavily processed food to make acorns edible, and it's ancestral. So it's just not processed as bad, highly processed seed oils, but it's how they're processed, right? And there's, what they're bottled in and the light exposure, and there's all these variables, right?
Yeah. Well, I think some people don't make the connection. Like I didn't. I don't know why. I just don't know why. Didn't really make the connection until the vocabulary started coming into my world view. And, so like I said, we got to Bordeaux. I wasn't feeling good. So I somehow came into the ancestral health, space. But at the same time, I was, curious about the food in France, in Bordeaux, and, learning about that. And so I learned a lot about just living there, about the French lifestyle, which so traditionally, they go to the markets, which are often outdoors. They go often because they have small fridges. And so they develop relationships with the community, with other people who are going to buy their groceries, and with the vendors. There's a different vendor for each thing. There's the chicken person who sells, also sells rabbits there and eggs. And then there's the butcher and the wine vendor and etc. The cheese. It goes on. And it's a beautiful part of the culture, and what makes people go back to France, for example, again and again. The people just love. Why do they love it? Or even Italy, because all of these, because they've been able to hold on to these ancestral traditions, part of their culture, part of the daily routine. And I feel like in the US, we've lost a lot of that, though some of it comes back with, we have farmers markets now, and you can develop a relationship with your local vendor, farmer, butcher, baker. So, but that's something that I learned, and I tried to infuse into the book, is that it's not just the food per se, it's how you procure it, preparing it maybe with a friend, or preparing it for family and friends, and then sharing it around the table, maybe with a glass of wine. They still do that in France, but more and more, their life is fast paced, and they've, even there in the best French restaurants, I would dare to say that they do use seed oils. So it's kind of inescapable. They just don't know.
Yeah.
And I wish they did. But
I was going to ask if because I know olive oil is big in like Greece, and
yeah.
I haven't traveled, so I can't speak to even Italy, which is sad because I'm Italian. But you didn't see a lot of olive oil there in France, or?
No, I did. However, as you know, here in the U.S., there are a lot of olive oils that are cut. The regulations are not strong enough to where But of course, yes, there is a lot of olive oil cooking. There is, and then clarified butter is the traditional. So why clarified? Because it takes away you just heat the butter, heat regular butter, and then you end up with something on the top, which you can kind of spoon off, and then the whey proteins, which settle at the bottom. But in the middle, you have this beautiful golden oil that you can use. That's the clarified butter. So it won't burn, as easily. So traditionally they would use that, but that's more expensive. So, the excuse now is these seed oils are ubiquitous, odorless, tasteless, easy to buy, easy to use. So even the chefs are trained using this stuff. And when I had an experience where I was cooking with a starred chef outside of Paris at his home, and we were going to cook 4 organ meats recipes. And the first one was kidney, which was covered in suet, which is the most prized, of the tallow of the beef fats. And he was prying it off and going to put that into the garbage can. And I was like, no, that's what we're going to cook with today. Not because he was bringing out, a bottle of a plastic bottle of sunflower seed oil. I couldn't believe it. So I think it's just a matter of letting people know, kind of, I don't know, re-education. I don't know if that's even possible, at the cordon bleus of the world. But anyway, I'm going on and on. But I just, most restaurants, most people, yes, they will use olive oil, but again, like I said, you don't know, are they using it depends, I guess, on the restaurant. But you have to you have to know the chef and talk to them and see what it is in their kitchen that they have that they're using.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, I know there's like apps now and websites. I think Seed Oil Scout,
Keto Scout,
and
yeah.
stuff. Yeah, where you
Hmm.
can, or you ask the waiter. I always, I just never ask because I'm like they're just gonna spit in the food. If the way the waiter usually looks at, I go out with friends, and there was one guy visiting me from Miami recently, Alphonse, and we went out to one of my favorite restaurants here, and he was just asking, "Do you cook in butter?" And just the reaction to, from a lot of the waiters, they usually are like, "Oh, geez, it's one of those people."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. One of those. It's unfortunate. Yeah. So I
Yeah.
don't go out actually. I don't know. People ask me about restaurants. I just I don't know because I'm not going to get what I really want, and you pay a lot of money for a great steak. Even oh my goodness, even Thomas Keller uses in his masterclass. I love his cooking, but what does he do to cook his côte de boeuf? Nice big beautiful steak. He uses, on a beautiful skillet, he uses this oil to start with, not tallow. And I just feel like, okay, I'm redoing that recipe, and we're using tallow, and then the butter at the end to baste. But yeah, I don't know,
Yeah,
it's a problem.
I've been posting. People have different opinions on isolated nutrient supplementation, and there's like a big whole food movement, and I have friends like that. I have close friends like that won't take isolated nutrients, and I get that worldview and philosophy and whatever you want to call it. But yeah, I've done a lot of research on like mixed tocopherol vitamin E for mitigating oxidative stress induced from seed oils, and it really does protect from the omega-6 uh part, especially the N6 fatty acids. So I usually just take vitamin E when I go out, and that's my kind of solution to protect my cell membranes and stuff from the oxidative stress. And I have done experiments too where I eat, something that's definitely in seed oils, and then I go out in the sunshine, and my skin, I'm very in tune with my skin. I grew up with acne and eczema, and I could tell if, the effect of the sun when I'm in it, if I'm starting to get burned, and there is definitely a protective effect if I do that. Um, so
That's
that's one
interesting.
one thing
Yeah.
that I use. But
Yeah,
yeah.
that's good to know. I will keep that in mind, the
Hmm.
vitamin E for going out.
Yeah. There. I mean, once you start stacking all these mitigation strategies, it's like, why am I even going out? Take something before you drink, and all before you know it, you're taking 5 or 6 things just to go out and have fun. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd rather feel better, you know.
Well,
Uh,
actually, I have a question about the vitamin E because whenever I look at vitamin E's online, they are in, like for skincare products, as an ingredient, they're always in sunflower oil or something like that.
mhm.
Is that what it has to come in that, or can you find it?
You can definitely find it in other forms. Yeah. So
Okay, I'll have to look
yeah,
that
some
up.
some companies use olive oil. I used to use MCT oil. You could even find it in powdered form, but I prefer the liquid. So yeah, and everyone reacts differently to MC. Like some people have extreme nausea with medium chain triglyceride oil. I put it in my coffee every single day, and I feel great as long as it's a
Yeah,
small amount.
right.
But yeah, I always recommend. I mean, even
Hmm.
though I have my own product, it's like if you don't feel good on mine, try a different brand. I mean, that goes for anything, for sure. Um, while we're on this topic of supplements, what are your thoughts on like organ meat supplements? Because I know those blew up. Like, what was it, 4 years ago, especially with Brian Johnson, and then now there are other companies, and it just keeps um, it, and I used to follow Ray Peat stuff pretty closely before he passed, and he was always cautioning against desiccated beef liver uh, supplements that, oh, it oxidizes the vitamin A, but if it's defatted, there's no vitamin A. I mean, I'm so
Mhm.
deep in that I know there's all these like details that really matter, and I think people tend to like blanket fear things because it depends on how it's processed, and not all brands are the same. But personally, I mean, I've definitely have supplemented testicle, pancreas. I mean, all the different organ meats in powdered form, and I felt them. They definitely,
Yeah.
they definitely have an effect, no question. But
Yeah. I mean, before my days of knowing how to cook liver, I took liver powder. I'd even put sprinkle a little in my girls, ground beef, but they can tell when there's liver powder in there. Um, and I don't take any personally right now, though, every now and then we'll take some extra thymus,
Mm,
desiccated.
cool.
Um, so when it comes to those supplements, I feel like actually organ meats are so easy to cook. You don't even really have to do much. And but that's what I want to show. So I'm writing a next book on organ meats, and I want to show how easy it is and how few ingredients you need, and get a whole I've got a whole collection of organ meats related recipes, originating really from France. And so, but anyway, so for for my supplement, what I do is I basically take a piece of raw liver and throw it in the pan with my ground beef and my eggs in the morning, when I remember. We've been renovating the kitchen, so I'm cooking in the dining room, and the fridge is on the other side of the house. It's crazy. But in sort of normal times, I just find that eating the real thing is so much better than these the little tiny bit of powder that's in there. I mean,
Mhm.
it just seems like you can get so much more. Not that you even need that much more.
Mhm.
You can cut the thymus gland, or which is sweetbreads, or the heart or liver, into little pieces, freeze them, fry them up, or swallow them, kind of still frozen if you prefer. So I guess with supplements, for travel, they might be really good. Noticed a difference, and you do have to kind of look at their origin and how they are. I don't know much about that. That was interesting that you said defatted, right? Takes out the vitamin A. We don't, I mean, we don't even know what all is in the
Mhm.
organ meats,
Mhm.
even. And we don't know what we're missing when
Mhm.
we're not eating them, or we're just taking, even just a few little capsules.
Mhm.
So I just feel like I want people to know, to have confidence in making organ meats for themselves and their families. Though, to be honest, my girls don't they eat liverwurst, but they don't want like a heart steak. So I tend to just cook, ground beef, steaks,
Yeah.
kind of the same thing over and over. Um, but um, but yeah, as far as supplements go, I mean, you know, use them as needed for a short, a few months or something, until you can kind of get back to, or when you're traveling. I think
Mhm.
it's not a bad idea.
Mhm.
Um, but
Yes.
overall, oh,
So,
sorry. Well, people
no, it's good.
didn't ancestrally didn't have supplements.
Mhm.
So, and like the size of the cow is, of its liver is proportionate to the rest of the meat that you can eat. It's kind of, you only need a small piece of liver
Mhm.
versus a bigger steak, for example.
Mhm.
Um, Sorry. Anyway, go ahead.
No, those are great points. No, I just wanted to touch on when you were saying, uh, so like I wasn't raised with organ meat, so for me, like I taste the copper in it, I think, the
Yeah.
iron, the tanginess. It's not pleasant, but what I did, I think it was in the routine 4 years ago, is I would get raw bison liver. I would slice it up into cubes, separate it into Ziploc bags. I wouldn't weigh it and be precise. I would just split it up in a certain number of Ziploc bags, put it in the freezer, and then thaw one out on a cutting board and just swallow those little
Yeah.
tiny pill-sized thawed out chunks, like a pill, and that worked great for me. And that way, I didn't have to taste it, and Definitely stronger effect than capsules for sure. And like you said, I'm sure there's nutrients in there that maybe are processed out when it's dried or something. Maybe just having the hydration in there has an effect, or it's mixed with the water already and doesn't have to mix with the water in our body to kind of activate. But that's a good trick that I used, and
Yeah.
I know too there are like ground beef companies that are mixing in heart and liver, right, 1 or 2% into the ground meat. But to me, even that is a strong taste. Like I could definitely, even if it's a couple percent of organ meats in the ground beef, I could still taste it.
Yeah,
Uh,
you can definitely taste it.
yeah.
So what I recommend there is, a lot of really good salt, sea salt
Mhm.
uh, or Himalayan salt. Maybe that's tested for heavy metals if possible. And what's fun too, well, the French are great with sauces, so they'll put sauce on everything. You can uh, kind of make like a butter sauce or butter and honey. Honey kind of sweetens the deal, and that makes, oh, and even fruit, just fresh fruit, alongside the piece of liver. Um, and I don't know, but if you eat it often enough, you don't notice it as much. I know what you're saying that about that metallic taste. But some of the recipes that I have, they're the French, they caramelize their pieces of meat, caramelized tripe or what have you, and or you have a stew and there's bone marrow in the stew, and it makes the flavor so rich and wonderful. Uh, so I think the fresh ingredients that you use and sort of the richness, which is what makes French cooking so famous, and I think it will make it more palatable. But yeah, the honey is that's a good hack.
That's a
Honey
great tip.
or
Yeah.
fresh berries.
Mhm.
Um, so, and it's, the tallow, the honey, the salt, it's just so rich and wonderful that you can get it down much more easily than just plain.
Yeah, that's a great tip. Well, what about uh, bone broth? What are your thoughts on that? Because that kind of goes along with the nose to tail,
Yeah.
consuming the whole animal. Or did you use or do you use a lot of that? Consume a lot of bone broth or?
Yeah, well, so thanks for asking. I try to make it regularly, so I save all the bones, and we try to eat meat on the bone, which has a lot of collagen in it. And I don't know if you know Dr. Kate Shanahan. She talks a lot
Mhm.
about the 4 pillars of health and sort of ancestral eating, and one of them is eating a lot of meat on the bone because the collagen, but then you can use the bones for your bone broth. So I try to make it regularly, and I'll put in a mix of whatever we've eaten, and it's really a nice. It's almost like raw milk is like a reset for your stomach or for your digestive system. Sort of the first thing to go down in the morning, maybe. Uh, I find it's really just the best way, much better than a powder, of course. I rely on, but the thing about bone broth, it's really the stocks are the foundation of sauces in French cooking. So they're in the recipes, and they make the sauces. That's what gives them flavor, and they're the marrow bones and the veal foot, which is very collagenous. Like there's certain ingredients like that go into certain stocks, like the veal stock, for example, which is the basis of so many, excuse me, recipes. And so it's just a natural thing, something that I learned from the French. They wouldn't go buy it, and in most French restaurants of quality, they always have a big stock pot going. So
Mhm.
they can use it, they can reduce it, add the wine or whatever they do with it. So yeah, I think it's a wonderful addition, it opens up a lot of possibilities. And so something that I like to do is I'll buy the canoe cut marrow bones from the butcher shop and then eat that with a spoon. Like you roast it for 20 minutes or whatever, 30 minutes if it was frozen, and with salt and pepper if you like, and just spoon, it's just a few little spoonfuls in the morning, for example, or for a meal, before a meal. And it's just this like boost of fat and nutrients.
Cool.
And then that bone can go into the bone broth, or you put a full marrow bone roasted into a stew like their what's it called? Something deveau, like the veal stew. I'm blanking on it now, of course. Or like boeuf bourguignon. You can put in a marrow bone and that thickens it.
Okay.
So yeah, bone broth, bones, wonderful ingredient.
That's awesome. Yeah, I figure a lot of listeners probably have a family, have children, they're married or boyfriend, girlfriend, or whatever. I'm solo here, so like you said, cooking from scratch. I'm like working on renovating an underground bunker and building out 100 acres. So like I've been relying on buying a lot of
Sure.
stuff and just outsourcing the work. But yeah, I used to make like homemade gummies with gelatin powder, and you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not the same effect as. I mean, they're great for like on the go. If you're going on a day hike or something. But if I'm home, I like just sipping on the actual thing. The bone broth is. I mean, and I love the
Yeah.
chicken bone broth the best. It's just something about the chicken
Sure.
stock that's so good. So
Yeah. It's
yeah,
good for you. It's collagenous and yeah, it's
yeah,
wonderful.
yeah. The gelatin or the glycine amino acid is supposed to, and I even supplement that isolated on top, but that's supposed to be an anti-aging thing that balances out, the methionine and the cysteine and the amino acids that are found in the muscle meat. So you kind of get that amino acid balance if you're consuming that a lot. So I
Yeah,
cheat by
that's
just
right.
supplementing.
Good
Yeah.
point. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
but yeah, that's a good point though. I mean,
Yeah.
to have those, why did the French, I mean, maybe they didn't even know why they were doing
Mhm.
this, but that they had the reduced bone broths as the sauce
Mhm.
over their meat or vegetables. I focus on the meat recipes, but
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And you mentioned vegetables. Like I have a 40-foot geodesic dome greenhouse here that I'm growing a ton of stuff. And I know like the carnivore argument is the anti-nutrients, the plant toxins, the oxalates, the Sally Norton, the phytates, the what I forget the other one, oxalates, phytates, and lectins,
Yeah.
that those are stressful to the body, and especially the oxalate poisoning. And I think there's a genetic component, especially to the oxalate stuff, from what I understand, where the peroxisomes are targeting that determines uh how someone stores oxalates. So I don't know. I just think people like have an effect from something and then kind of blanket it out there and say, nobody should supplement vitamin C because of this, or nobody should eat vegetables because I had this reaction, or I don't know. I just see
Yeah.
a lot in the health community where like this projection. I'm like, no, everybody's different genetically. Some people can eat a ton of veggies, they're never going to get oxalate poisoning. It's
Yeah.
it varies per person.
Yeah, it's hard not to be so convinced that this is the thing. Um, so, and I've fallen for that as well. But yeah, I mean, for me, I think maybe because of my digestive history with the ruptured appendix and everything, I do find it harder to digest some vegetables and certain fibers and things. Um, so personally, I don't know. You go through phases, right?
Mhm.
So, and what works this month may not work next month, but you kind of try to find what's good for you. But I have found that consistently, I feel really good with just a simple diet and also no snacking, which is something I just
Mm.
recently in the last few months started was no snacking between meals. And the insulin, right, I think it's just my insulin has been much better regulated as a result. So for mood, and energy level and that kind of thing. Of course, you have to dial in your sleep and
Hmm.
be regular about that and try to not be, I wear my blue blockers all the time, you know, in the dark. Um, but uh, but there's just yeah. Well, I forgot what I was saying. Where was I going with that?
So yeah, it was vegetables and then
Oh,
no
vegetables,
snacking and
right.
yeah.
I'm not crazy. Yeah, I don't know. Some people really love their salads, and I used to too, but I don't really eat them right now. But I do love fruit, and I just try not to go crazy on that. So I'll eat, the ground beef. I basically, ground beef, some liver, some fruit, egg, raw milk. I drink too much of that. It's so addicting, but it's like my dessert,
It's really good. Yeah. Bovine or goat or what type of
Yeah.
milk do you like?
Well, we
From
have
the cow?
access to, so through our butcher shop nearby, they are connected with a dairy farm, an organic grass-fed dairy farm.
Cool.
So we have a herd share. So we get 2 gallons a week of the cow milk. You can also get the cream, raw cream and raw kefir. Um, but well, sometimes I get those. But we have so much raw milk that I don't want it to go to waste, and I just love it.
Yeah, if mine ever goes sour, I just give it to my chickens. They go nuts for it. They're like my
Oh, yeah.
garbage disposals.
Right. That's perfect. Yeah. And you can make buttermilk biscuits with it, but I mean, you don't need that much for
Mhm.
yeah, for buttermilk biscuits. But I'd rather just drink it before it turns. But yeah, that's a good idea to feed your chickens.
Yeah. Well, speaking of drinking, I said before we recorded, I wanted to ask your thoughts on wine and um you got a wine diploma, right? From Bordeaux and you studied that back in the day.
Yeah. Yeah. I did a year of wine science, which I've forgotten. It was all in French. A year of that and tasting. So we'd have, 2 hours of lecture twice a week and followed by 1 hour or so of tasting different wines, primarily French wines. So yeah, I mean, I it's been a while, but I do in my book, The Bordeaux Kitchen, I have a whole chapter on what I learned because before I forgot, I wanted to write it all down, put it, in there about the fermentation process, or also following winemakers through the year. What do they go through? What do they do? So yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, well, something else that I like is to suggest wine pairings for each
Okay.
recipe. And so I would ask friends, or I'd test it out myself, or I'd sort of research the wines and kind of see what. But really, if you're pairing wine and food, it's more. It's more about the moment that you're creating, I guess, with
Mhm.
when you are choosing a wine. Because usually, if you're going to drink wine with a meal, it's probably a special occasion, and you're thinking about your friends or your family and what the dish is, and that's what makes a wine so special, And
Mhm.
most wines will go with whatever food you're making. I mean, there are some rules, but um, yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, it's funny in the health community because you have people saying alcohol is straight poison, you should never drink it. And I think there's actual health benefits to ethanol consumption, even if we're just reducing lipofuscin accumulation, which is like a age pigment that is basically a hallmarker of aging. And so just a small amount, though, if you overdo it and you're alcoholic, that actually increases
Yeah.
lipofuscin, which is like age spots and stuff. Uh,
Huh.
so there are literal health benefits, like real health benefits to drinking alcohol, but I think most people can't stop at one, right? And lately I've been enjoying gin. I was drinking tequila and just one shot, I wouldn't go over one shot. And I feel so much better from that juniper berry
Hmm.
gin than I do from the tequila. And it's I don't know if it's in my
Interesting.
head or if it's ancestral because I have a lot of English blood, and I doubt my ancestors ever touched tequila. And
No.
so I wonder with wine, because I don't do that well on wine, and I've tried dry wines for years, like dry farm wines, and
Yeah.
I don't. You always hear sulfites, and I would always just feel like kind of stuffy, a little bit of like a histamine
Sure. Oh,
reaction.
yeah.
So
I
it's
mean, yeah, I do too, actually. And if when I consume wine with a meal, it's probably maybe half a glass over the course of that meal or course.
okay.
And yeah, I think you become more sensitive to it the less that you drink it. Um, but I think the point about the wine, at least in France and probably Italy and other countries, is more, it's something, it's the way the French speak about it, it's poetic. The beautiful aromas, the bouquet of the old wine, and all the flavors, the body of the wine. I mean, it's just poetry, and it's something they actually talk about when they're at the table, and it's a good bottle of wine, and or at least in Bordeaux they talk a lot about wine because everyone is in the wine industry, a winemaker or distributor, and it's just it's something that you share with friends and family, over the course of a meal. So not kind of quick downing something. It's really just a sip to go with the flavors of the create. It's to talk about and family. So it's just it's a cultural piece, and I do know that there are people who say it's poisonous, and I mean I would agree that it has a lot of deleterious effects. But the French will talk about the resveratrol and all the good, there are effects that we can't really quantify, like that being
Yeah.
around friends and family and sharing that and remembering. I mean, I remember in one class where we were, when you're in class, the pros, they cracher, they spit out the wine. So that's what we always had to do. But I remember my best pal, who ended up being the best in the class, Malika. She's also a wine grower in Bordeaux. She and I were testing the sweet wines, or the whole class was, but she and I just looked at each other. We had to swallow it. We couldn't spit it out. It's just so delicious. And so there are times when you you can have a few sips, especially with a meal. I think the food tempers it. But I wouldn't say, drink even a glass a day or multiple glasses a day. I think, everyone has a different tolerance. Um,
Yeah.
but it is lovely to really drink a good glass of wine, a good Bordeaux,
Mm-hmm.
or half of a
Yeah.
glass.
Yeah, that's a good point about drinking with the food because you always hear that it stops digestion, or at least I've heard that. So like drink it before the meal, but to me I feel worse if I mean especially with wine or something that my body's not processing well. And you
Yeah.
might have seen the funny memes that are going around with the biohacker Brian Johnson, and then you have next to him like a older person in Europe that's 105 or 102, and they like smoke every day, drink alcohol every single night, and they're still kicking, they look decent.
Yeah.
And it's like you said, it's that health is not just about the biology, the chemistry stuff. There's this whole other aspect, whether you want to call it spiritual, mental, emotional, all of that, right? That's
Yeah.
just as important.
Community,
That's,
community and
mhm, community.
lifestyle. Yeah. I mean, there's the funny sort of research about the blue zones, which has been, debunked and defended and all those things. But there are some elements there that I think, there's people when they have a community or a reason to share their food or their experience, they're outdoors, the Mediterranean sun or equator, a lot of sunlight, and hanging around outside more than inside. A lot of those older people, they have dark little apartments with tiny fridges, so they're much more likely to be in the village square, which is what we need more of, I think, in the US, is sort of village squares, kind of common places where people and every age, still has a place in society. And so I think that all figures into this magical, spiritual part of the culture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I agree. Yeah, it is cool to see the farmers markets, and we have one up here, and I'll probably start selling there because I need tax write-offs. The money I'm spending building out this mountain. And you're into skincare too, right? Like tallow on the skin, and I've been experimenting with that, various brands over the last, I don't know, 4 years, as far as mostly body soap. You know,
Yeah,
I just only use tallow body soap for years, and it's great.
yeah,
Um, it's very just gentle. My skin likes it. Um, and then I don't use any of the other tallow products. I guess more generally for women. Well, I guess there are like sunscreens and stuff I've played with, tallow sunscreens and stuff. But personally, as a guy, I just use the the body soap, and I love
yeah.
it.
Yeah, well, I think tallow is just such a great ingredient. And
Mhm.
as I was learning about um, cooking, French cooking, I learned that different regions in France used different kinds of fats, animal fats usually. Whether it was duck fat in the southwest of France or butter in the north, Normandy, Brittany, or olive oil in Provence, etc., by the Mediterranean, um, which isn't an animal fat, but they did, they used their fats or lard in kind of the Alsace area, which borders Germany, where sort of my family comes from. But the these fats, these natural fats, really hydrate the skin. And I find even more so than olive oil, but I do use some olive oil in my products. We're more animal than we are vegetable. So I feel like tallow, and tallow's Latin name is sebum. The fat or the oil that's in the skin makes. I mean, I think it just mirrors the profile of fatty acids much more than anything else. Um, so, and I was seeking myself, good moisturizers. I always have dry skin, and I think that's low thyroid function partly. But a lot of people have dry skin from being indoors too much, etc. Um, and so I created some formulas just for myself to start with, and I was kind of inspired by a German company that they were biodynamic. They used shea butter and beeswax, and so I thought, well, can I add tallow to that? Would that be? And so I tried, and basically, you just melt the things together. And I mean, there is a little bit of technique, of course, but I've developed, a line of sort of lip balms and body butters. So yes, women do tend to use those more, I guess. But if you don't have dry skin, you don't need that, which is great. But yeah, the sunscreen is another good product. Women are, always looking for deodorants or body butters, lip stuff. So, but I also make soaps, and I actually make them out of lard or tallow. I have two different kinds, and so even when you have bacon fat, you can turn that leftover bacon fat into soap.
Cool. Yeah, I'm,
Yeah.
I'm looking at your bug repellent. I got my first wasp sting last summer, right on the
Oh,
knuckle, and that was it. Definitely woke me up. There was probably some good stuff in there. I felt kind of energized for a few a few days, but I might have to try out your bug repellent lotion bar. It's
oh
interesting.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, that's right. So everything I make, I try to make it mostly, the largest proportion of the largest proportional ingredient, or however you say it, is tallow, and then everything else after that. Just because I feel like that's the best ingredient,
Mhm.
the most um, moisturizing for our skin, and people do enjoy it. I think you can get by with just putting tallow, well, maybe a mix of tallow and another oil like olive oil and beeswax, those three on your skin. I do make things that where I have other oils that have been, let's say, touted or marketed as being, good for this. Women love, rosehip seed oil or sea buckthorn oil. So I mix those in a little bit because I'm trying to um, serve as I guess the word is the gateway drug or the gateway cream for them to, the more tallow the cream has, I think, the better. But people have to kind of take baby steps to get
Mhm.
in, into that. I think. And anyway, so yeah, it's a lot of fun. I love to mix things, so that's part of why I do that too.
Yeah, and you make candles too, right? Is that,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, just
that,
yeah, it's the
that's
beeswax and the tallow. I mean, that's what they used to use, right? Tallow was one of whale fat, I think, was
Mhm.
also, but tallow candles, it comes up in literature all the time.
Wow.
Um,
Wow. Yeah, because I used to make beeswax candles, but I never thought to mix in tallow, and it's pretty easy to make the
yeah.
beeswax candles. I just got lazy, so now I buy them. But that's what I light my dinner with every single night, just with two beeswax candles, just
Yeah,
enough
it's
to see my
lovely.
food. Hmm.
Oh, that's great. Yeah,
Hmm.
I would do that too, but my family likes to have some artificial light. I try to turn on my red light, so in the
Yeah.
background a little bit.
Do,
But
do you
yeah,
do you use the incandescent lights? Because I've been asking some of the guests on, like, I just had a show on dirty electricity that'll go live in a few
oh
days, and he was saying that they're actually like natural dirty electricity filters, those incandescent
yeah,
lights. It's
that's
interesting.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so we do have we have some uh, lamps that we didn't change out that were incandescent bulb
Mhm.
receivers, and
Mhm.
so I've tried different. From different vendors. Unfortunately in the kitchen have had uh, halogen, which they're okay, but they
Mhm.
flicker a lot.
Mhm.
And I thought I could maybe hack that by buying red halogen, but the kind of makes it worse.
Yeah.
So I don't know. We're figuring that out, but we're um, trying to find maybe a low flicker LED. But basically, for me, I mean, I have to live with I live with my family, so I put on my blockers when basically at sunset, and we have some of the lights on. But when I walk around with my little red light, I look like a little alien, I guess. And to the neighbors, I don't even know what they think. They could see the red light, my sauna light on, and it's but I just try to avoid it. And of course, I use iris on
Mhm.
my screens, and I
Mhm.
do the little red thing on the red screen on the
Mhm.
phones, and just try to mitigate that. And I try to work outside as much as
Mhm.
possible. But
Yeah.
so yeah, I wish that. Well, I think the incandescents may be coming back more
Mhm.
again now, hopefully. Um, I think a little bit easier to find. So, but for some reason, people have been so bought into the really bright blue lights. Even cars, with
Mhm.
it's. Um, I don't know. I hope people become more aware of how bad the blue light affects them, because I think it really does affect people poorly and their sleep.
Mm-hmm.
So
Absolutely, yeah. I do feel like it's beneficial on like gloomy days, like up here in North Idaho. It's been pretty gloomy for weeks, and that's when the blue actually feels good, as long as I don't, it's not all day, if I still go outside, obviously. But the extra blue hit does seem to help on gloomy days.
oh, that's interesting. That's really interesting to hear.
Yep.
Yeah.
But I balance
Wow.
it out with red light. I have the red light
Sure.
panel. I do, I don't know, 30 minutes a day or something in front of that. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's
That's good.
yeah.
I try to journal in front of my red panel at night before I go to sleep. Or it's the panel, it's like four big bulbs. Um, and because it's hard to find time, running a household, the family, renovating a kitchen, trying to relaunch a website, write a book, and all the things. And um, but yeah, sort of at night is a nice time to sit down and think about the day and just calm down a bit.
Yeah, yeah, reflection time.
Yeah.
Um, do you want to go through some of the listener questions that people sent
Oh
in? Because we
yeah.
have we have a few here. Let me see. Does tallow on the face clog your pores, or is that a myth? Someone asks.
So I think that's a myth. Um, what clogs the pores is seed oils in the diet. I
Mhm,
think,
mhm,
and so my college teenager who comes every time she comes home, she's got some acne
mhm,
because she's been eating seed oils.
mhm,
And she uses my cream.
mhm,
And she said, she's even told me, both of my daughters have said, wow, when I use your cream, Mama, my spots feel better, they go
mhm.
away. So, I mean, that's, I don't know. I don't even think that tallow on the FDA website, there's an FDA thing where they, they, they go through each food and they give you the nutrients. We don't even know what all is in every, organ or every food but tallow they've got nothing. So, and I don't
That's
know why, but that would be something that we should all kind of rally to demand, give us the nutrient information that's in
yeah.
tallow. But anyway, yeah, I think each person should just try it and see how it works. Because some people have naturally more oily,
Hmm.
more sebum, more oily skin, and might not need it.
Hmm.
But something that I do is like for your women audience, um, like I use some oil, or I have this facial cleanser, which is mostly tallow, and you can wipe off the makeup with a cotton ball or a washcloth. You can rub it. You can rub the facial cleanser, which is mostly tallow, into your face, and then wash it off, and then reapply, as a moisturizer. But I find, I mean, people love it, and I like it too. It's just tallow is so it's just so clean and wonderful. Leaves you feeling really
Hmm.
good. So
Yeah.
if you want to use a cream, I would say tallow more than any other any other
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. I'll have to get you some vitamin E to have your daughter try, because yeah, that's
Oh
seems to
yeah.
be the antidote to the acne problem with
Okay, cool.
at least it was, yeah, it helped me. So
Very interesting. But did you
yeah.
also change your diet though when you at all, or sleeping habits or sunlight or screen time when you were,
Y- Yeah, there were there were definitely a lot of variables, but I never stopped like eating out ever. Like I still went out to eat often, and I'm sure the
mm,
restaurants weren't using tallow or
yeah, yeah, yeah.
butter.
Okay.
But yeah, you're right. There are a lot of variables. So, um, let's see. Best wine and time to drink it. You already talked about the timing a little bit. Do you think foreign is best? Because I always hear like you've probably heard the glyphosate thing with
I've
wine that
heard the glyphosate thing. I'm kind of
yeah.
a French wine snob. Um, yeah, gosh, in terms of, well, so some of my friends in Bordeaux are, excuse me, are wine growers that they do biodynamic and organic. It kind of goes hand in hand.
Mhm.
So what you can do is you can look for those labels. On the back, you can see, at least in France, I think in Italy too. Excuse me. Um, I don't know much about European wines, but in general, but in France, you can find organic and biodynamic. So you might be less likely to have issues than with the glyphosate. I don't even want to drink, California wines, unfortunately, or U.S. wines because of the pesticides. It's just so rampant, and it can move from vineyard to vineyard.
Mhm.
In France, they do have a lot of regulations, but I think it's a tough question because there are certain things that they sometimes need to use, like I think like copper or something to stop
Mhm.
certain molds and mildews, and then it becomes not organic. So you just have to kind of try. And the best wine is the wine that you enjoy with your friends and family.
Mhm. Yeah.
So, if you have a good experience and good people around you, and good food, I think, and a good bottle of wine, you won't feel shitty afterwards.
Mhm.
But you have to kind of, you know, um, just go with what you like, or experiment, or ask friends. The people at the wine stores always love to help you,
Mhm.
and there are lots of books on wine pairing, if you're looking
Mhm.
for something to, and my book has, with every recipe, including the organ meats and the desserts and the vegetables, you can find some nice pairings with wine. So, and in terms of like headaches afterwards, whatever, some people prefer white wine.
Mhm.
Some people can't handle sparkling wines, but it's just a
Mhm.
personal.
Mhm.
I don't know if that even answers the question, but
No, that was great. Yeah, I cheat. I interviewed a guy that sells genetically modified bacteria. It's definitely like a modern solution, but it's a transient bacteria shot that you drink, and it's
oh,
breaks down the acetaldehyde in the gut before it reaches the liver. So like it's like protecting
oh,
the liver from
interesting.
that acetaldehyde, and that acetaldehyde is a lot of the hangover effects and a lot of the
Yeah,
harmful effects on the body. So but yeah, I used to be so anti-GMO, and I'm like, well, maybe if I mean if it's just moving through the body, it's not permanently modifying your
right.
microbiome, then they have a
Yeah,
use. So,
yeah. Well, something about European wines, though, again, is they have appellations, and the appellation, uh, it's just the word means, name. Um, but they have, each appellation has its rules and regulations, and you'll find there are more famous ones than others, and if they follow the rules, the dry farming, for example, no extra irrigation, and only certain numbers of sulfites that can be added, or whatever, then or sulfates. You can. I mean, they have certain rules, and people aren't going above and beyond that. So you can search for that in that way for
mm,
sort of high quality. Whereas,
cool.
maybe in other countries, it's you don't even know. Like in some of the big box wine stores that sell boxes of wine, even,
Hmm.
you might not really know what you're getting.
Yeah,
So that's
that
one way
makes
to, yeah.
that's a great tip. Yeah. This is a fun one. Any concerns about eating brain? Will it turn me into a
Oh,
zombie?
yeah. So I actually have one of my brain recipes on the website. it's been there, so it doesn't look as great as the new website itself. That post is an old one, but you can find that there. Basically, so it's all about sourcing, right? Find a trustworthy farmer or butcher. I mean, in France, you can still you can go to the halal butchers, and they will often have lamb brains. And that's what I've cooked before. Also, I guess veal brain as well, but that gets made into head cheese. And you can eat it, and in fact, it's I guess the texture is a little mushy unless you bread it and sort of fry it, or mix it. You can mix it in scrambled eggs, kind of thing. But it's really good, I think, for the brain, for cognitive function, and there's just so many nutrients. Then the fatty acids and all the nutrients in there. I would say, gosh, if you can find, a good source, just a great hack. And one of the techniques is to poach, meaning just, kind of boil gently, simmer in hot water and maybe a little vinegar and salt in, the brains for 10 minutes or something. And then you can fry it up in butter and it tastes great. And you can add parsley and salt and you're good to go. So I would say absolutely, if you can find, if you can find it in the US, go for it, and to alleviate your fears, just poach it, so that you're not eating it raw. Because, that would be the fear, right?
It's like prion disease, right? I think that's what it's called, that you would get from.
Yeah. But I mean, I think Paul Saladino has talked about this, where he's eaten baboon brains and, in the bush. And I mean, it's a traditional food. People in France and other countries, it's part of the animal, nose to tail, that you just goes with everything else. So I wouldn't live by the fear. I would live by the nutrients.
Yeah, even with raw milk, right? A lot of these foods are demonized, and they're raiding farms and pouring it out, and that just seems to go with scaring us away from affordable solutions for our health, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. The raw milk, it's definitely a reset. I don't understand. It's interesting with the raw milk, for example, in Switzerland. So after Bordeaux, we moved to Switzerland for 3 years. And, they have a lot of farms there, a lot of cows. And they also the farms will often have kind of a vending machine where you bring your bottle and fill it up you pay by the liter. It's raw milk. And I think some of the farms might say, this is raw milk, you should boil it. They're saying this in German, Swiss German. But we didn't. I mean, it's just so good. They have their quality controls, and after all, it's Switzerland, right? But here too, they have very stringent quality controls. They do not want to be, let's say, caught or whatever, penalized. Their families depend on it, so they're not going to mess around, and they're going to have good, clean, raw milk. So I think the fear is unnecessary with that too.
Yeah, I agree. Let's see, one more. If you could only pick one organ meat to eat, what would it be?
Well, that's an easy one, liver, because it's got A to zinc, it's got molybdenum and copper and all the right balanced forms, and you only need a tiny bit. So that's definitely the one. One of my favorites, though, is also sweetbreads, which is the thymus gland. It's got a lot of immunogenic qualities for immunity, and it's just delicious. And it's actually something that has appeared and still does on French menus. traditionally, because uh, it's such a beloved food, and it's priced like a ribeye would be, because there's only one, or there are two lobes, but not many per cow, just this
Mm-hmm.
piece. And so that's that would be my second place one. But heart is great too. It's it's so full of, um, what itself, it has all these mitochondria in it and all the nutrients. I mean, it's a heart. It's got the all the all the things you need for life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so a good heart stew is really wonderful. You can barely taste the difference. Um,
Cool.
so yeah,
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I follow all the scare. Speaking of scare stuff, like vitamin A toxicity, I think it crescendoed like 2 years ago, maybe. I think because you always get these people just trying to rebut, like obviously Liver King blew up liver, and people just trying to make a name for themselves, I think, and,
sure.
and say what you're doing is toxic and what's trendy is toxic, and sometimes it is. But I just thought that vitamin A toxicity cult crowd, whatever you want to call it, went way overboard, because back to bioindividuality, like growing up with acne and eczema, I definitely fat soluble vitamins changed my life.
Mm,
And I was definitely raised with a deficiency in probably all of them, all four of them, but specifically vitamin A or retinol. And
yeah.
once I up my beef liver, and I wanted to ask you your thoughts on cod liver oil, because that's a very rich source of vitamin A as well. I actually take both, and I don't feel as good if I'm not taking both. And I'm getting a ton of vitamin A,
Interesting.
but I seem to be using it, and it's stored. And obviously, if you eat a polar bear liver, you can die from vitamin A. But we're not eating polar bear liver; we're eating,
Yeah.
other animals. Um, so yeah, I just wanted your thoughts on
Yeah.
cod. Do you just have you messed with just? I guess you'd eat straight cod livers, probably, right? Or
Well, no, I've had, so the French do, they eat
Mhm.
cod liver. They have various dishes. I haven't really delved into that myself. I have had in the past fermented cod liver oil. I'm not sure noticed a difference, and it may be because of other factors. I was malnourished in other areas, but I feel like for me, I don't feel a deficiency by not eating cod liver oil. There is vitamin A not only in liver but also in butter. I eat a lot of butter. I don't know how much there is in egg yolk, or even just red meat in general. But I think there is some amount in butter. Um, so I guess I should, I could try it again to have the liver and the cod liver oil. My worry, yeah, about cod liver oil is it oxidized? How do they keep it from oxidizing? What's the source? How can you? And I think the fermentation with the fermented cod liver oil can kind of go around some of that. I'm not really sure of the science with that. Maybe but um, I guess I try to think about how I can get most of my nutrients the way, say, the great great grandmother would have. Whether it is, yeah, it could be through oysters too.
Mhm.
My ancestors didn't live on the sea necessarily or whatever, but
Mhm.
I would, um, like the liver, the mixing up the foods, the liver, the butter, having it all there a little bit each day, seems
Mhm.
to be working pretty well. Though I'm sure I could optimize more.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's an interesting question.
Yeah. Yeah, I know the Vikings used to make cod liver oil with like birch tree branches, and basically cooking the liver in the oil. What from the liver would drop into
Mm,
the water, and they would basically process it and skim it off. And so it has been, but yeah, the
that's cool.
fermented I'm not a fan of, for sure. There was a controversy about that causing heart problems.
Mm,
And some people say, well, doesn't fermented mean rancid? And so, or you can't ferment a fat, or I don't know. There's all these different
yeah,
opinions on it. But I just use Rosita out of Norway, and I've
yeah.
actually spoken with the owner one
Oh,
on
okay.
one. He's great, and they seem high integrity. And yeah, I mostly use it for cold therapy. I don't know if you've seen on social media, because got back into cold plunges recently, and I noticed it's definitely like an antifreeze effect.
Hmm,
Even just
cool.
3 minute soak, it just, I feel, I don't know, stronger is the word or something. That, like, I don't know, antifreeze effect from the cod liver oil.
That's
But
very interesting. Yeah. Well, I
yeah.
know, like for getting back to the French diet,
Hmm.
ancestral diet, or just the general, world population diet, I think we've all eaten fish somewhere along the way. And so there probably is something to that. My worry also with the fish is how polluted the sea might
Hmm.
be. I just, you just don't really know unless you have your own lab, right?
Yeah.
Or have a friend who's, testing all this. So, but that's great that you were able to talk with the Rosita people. That would be, I definitely look into that, because I do feel like the lifestyle in the American suburbs lacks a little bit of, well, it can detract from optimal health for sure.
Yeah.
With
Yeah.
all
And
the
I interviewed Seatopia. They've kind of been on biohacking podcasts, and it's basically a guy that acts as a broker for farmed fish. And so I'm on a subscription where basically, it's that, like you said, with the ocean being polluted, and there's microplastics and heavy
Yeah.
metals, and potentially, parasite infection if the animal's immune system is down. And so this is basically kind of flipping the philosophy of farm fish being bad for you, and they're fed kind of like I feed my 9 koi fish in my greenhouse pond, like high quality food, and that determines the quality of
Yeah.
the fish and also the quality of the water. And so, controlled environment, um, so you don't have to worry about plastics and parasites and metals. So that's all the fish I eat 99% of the time, unless I go out.
Mm,
So yeah, that's kind
yeah.
of my solution to that problem, is actually eating farmed, but sourcing it through a company like that. So
Oh,
um,
yeah. Yeah,
mhm,
that makes sense. That
yeah,
I would definitely, yeah,
yeah.
because I mean, our ancestors, had access to cleaner fish. I think today
Hmm.
it's a little tougher. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great way to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. We definitely have to live differently. It's such an interesting time, and there's streaks in the sky that used to not be
Yeah.
there. And there's just more that we're dealing with, excess aluminum that's coming
Yeah.
from somewhere. And it's crazy. So do you ever get any blood work? I know you mentioned insulin earlier. Like, do you ever check your serum ferritin or 25 hydroxy D or hair tissue mineral analysis, or do you ever check in for any of that, or you more go by how you feel? And
Yeah, I do, and I have actually. One thing I can say is that, yeah, the ferritin, iron levels are fine.
Mhm.
Um, I and I still have my cycle actually, and
Cool.
so
That's great.
I don't know, yeah, early 50s.
Cool. That's awesome.
Yeah, yeah, maybe I'm doing something right. I don't know. But yeah, so but the other thing, yeah, besides insulin, the inflammation markers have been lower since I've been staying away from sugar and
Mhm.
not snacking, right?
Mhm. Cool.
And then the B12 is interesting because for a few years I actually had to take um, the injection, the
Mhm.
B12. It has the name something, um, methylcobalamin or something.
Mhm. That's the
And
most common. Yeah. Hmm.
yeah, so I was taking that because I suddenly had low B12 levels. But actually, when I was 25 and had the surgery, I had sort of the ruptured appendix, and then they had to remove parts of my large and small intestine, actually.
Oh.
But they still had to remove the part that absorbs B12. So they said, watch your B12 levels when you're older. So I thought, oh no, this is it. My time is up. But but I've found that I mean, I eat so much meat now, and bits of liver, right, dispersed, that and less of the junk, I'd say. My B12 levels really have been really high, like really robust. So that to me is a testament that uh, it's good. It's good for me to be eating, the way I am. But the other markers, gosh, I can't remember, but I know that I have always had a problem. Well, in high cholesterol, I love my high cholesterol numbers. I'm proud of them. Um, but I've been kind of hovering around the pre-diabetic, and I think that's just the sort of eating all day or drinking tea with cream. Actually, it's cream with a little tea. But if you drink it all day, then the insulin levels never have a chance to come down. So I've changed that now, and I think my levels, inflammatory, et cetera, are much better. And I'm just going to check them actually soon again, to see if my little experiment is working.
That's awesome. Yeah, I experimented with the CGM, the blood glucose monitor
Yeah.
that you leave in for 2 weeks, but it's kind of annoying when you fly because I don't opt out of the scan. I'm not afraid of getting radiated because I'm strong. But you have to do the pat down if you fly and you have the
Oh,
CGM. So you
yeah.
just got to time it around travel. Uh, but it was an interesting thing to see, seeing how different combinations of foods affect your blood sugar. And it's looking at interstitial. It's not looking at the blood. That's what people don't, realize, but they correlate pretty closely,
Yeah.
to the blood glucose levels. And yeah, it was cool to see. I tried different supplements and digestive enzymes and seeing what helped, if I'm eating a huge pasta meal. And it was very enlightening. Definitely, I think it was worth it. Like Levels is the one I used. It's basically just a
Yeah.
Libra freestyle that hooks to that app, and they're the best. It was just a super intuitive app and easy to use. But
Well, I think that's really helpful for your community, for you to tell them about that kind of thing, because um, maybe you're able to keep your stress levels
mhm.
stable. Because I think when you're interacting with family, um, the stress, I think, for for a lot of people, and including me myself, I think I react. My insulin, blood glucose reacts a lot to environmental stress and perceived stress, or how I take in what other people are doing and
Mhm.
how fast I've progressed on my projects or not. And so I think that also has a huge effect on uh, glucose levels and all the markers, probably even the inflammatory markers.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm trying to stick with the non-invasive tests. Like I like the HTMA gets blasted for being pseudoscience, but it's real. When you get a
Oh,
haircut,
yeah.
you just chop the hair, they burn it, they see the spectral emission, the light emission from it, and you can see like to me, the copper zinc ratio is one of the most important, but there's also sodium to potassium to show your stress load. But the copper to zinc, that's usually behind allergies. And I'm getting into a rant here, but but to me,
Oh,
like a
that's
mineral
interesting.
balance could be
Yeah.
that's usually a place to start because with people's health, I think is and you could do it with whole foods, and organ meats and stuff, but you might want to back off certain ones if your copper's super high and your zinc's low, or vice versa. So you can kind of fine tune things, uh,
Yeah.
knowing where you're at. And usually people have a zinc copper imbalance. Like I probably had excess copper my whole life because I didn't eat much red meat growing up. I just didn't like it. I was more of like a chicken guy. And I mean,
Yeah.
anxiety,
Mhm.
mood dysregulation, brain fog. A lot of that's usually copper excess. And I've been taking like 60 milligrams of zinc a day, in addition to beef and daily and stuff, steak. and yeah, I feel so much more stable and grounded, and just anxiety went away just by upping the zinc. So yeah, it's a
Yeah,
missing
but
piece.
what do you think about though the PUFA ratio? Like PUFAs
Mhm.
versus, the PUFA ratio of
Mhm.
is higher in the monogastric animals of chicken and pork
Mhm.
versus beef or bison or, the herbivores.
Yeah.
I mean, I wonder what you think of that because I mean, it seems most best balanced and including copper and zinc like in liver it's like
Hmm.
it's a packaged food right there, it's perfectly balanced for you.
Yeah.
But when it comes to, because all I've talked about is beef and
Hmm.
that I eat versus I don't really eat chicken and that much pork. I find they make me itchy.
Hmm.
So I'm curious to
I'm the
know.
same way. Yeah. Yeah. I just stick with, and that's probably part of my problem growing up with the brain fog and acne and eczema was the PUFA load, in addition to the seed oils,
Yeah,
obviously. But yeah, the four stomachs, the monogastric animals, the ruminants, they definitely have an ability to detoxify or convert, I guess is a more accurate way to put it.
yeah,
The PUFAs and HUFAs and um, yeah, yeah, they're definitely. I mean, I don't think chicken or like I eat pork probably once a year or BLT maybe once a month or something if I can find a good BLT sandwich. Um, but yeah, the ratio in the skin definitely matters, and I've read it takes. It depends, but 2, 3, up to 4 years to shift the
yeah,
fatty acid concentration in the skin from predominantly unsaturated to saturated. And I don't know, I keep going back and forth with this PUFA thing because obviously keeping seed oils out, but as far as climate goes, I grew up in the desert of SoCal for 30 years, Southern California and San Diego, and it's desert. It's hot down there. I hate it. And then I moved up north to the forest where I get a real winter. Last winter it was -20 for I think a week, -20 Fahrenheit, and you get real
oh
winters.
yeah,
And I love it. And I love the cold and the PUFAs are made to keep the membranes fluid in at cold water salmon, for example. So they don't. It's antifreeze, and
yeah,
even deer and stuff use it as well as antifreeze, eating high PUFA mosses and stuff um, to prepare for the winter. So I don't, they have their purpose, and I think there's like this geographical piece to keep in mind, to where up here, I would I should probably have more cod liver oil and more fish and more
mm-hmm.
omega-3 intake because I'm in this real cold environment. I mean, it's still in the 30s at night up here. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's really
Hmm.
interesting. I wonder though, like in the Alps, I'm thinking of, so I do, I'm doing a tour in July to this valley where Weston A. Price, Dr. Weston A. Price went. And I learned about it because I was reading about him and listened to the podcast. And anyway, it's in Switzerland, this valley, the Rutschental. And those people were the men were kind of recruited to be the guards for the Vatican. And I just wonder, I guess they had river fish, but they were some of the most robust people in all of Europe, right? Getting recruited for this thing. And um, I mean, they would eat, well, the Alpine raw milk, right? And the cheeses and their rye bread. And I just wonder, like, they must have they must have been eating, the river fish too, and somehow gotten the right. Like it's cold there. You were
Hmm.
talking about the cold
Yeah.
temperatures where you
Hmm.
are. It's cold most of the year, except for then 3 months in the summer when everything blooms and it's the snow melts and a lot of cold therapy eating, I think there. But anyway, it just made me think of, just think about it in the ancestral context,
Hmm.
how, um, yeah, how the fish and the pufas and I don't know. But it's interesting to hear too that you say you were when you have chicken and pork, that you have sort of maybe a histamine reaction or the itching. Because I thought I was going crazy, but maybe it's not just me.
Yeah, we're definitely in different times too. I mean, just with all the pollutants that are,
Yeah,
heavy metals are ubiquitous in the environment now because in these acid rain and these sulfuric and nitric oxide and stuff. And anyway, yeah, there's just a lot more to deal with and that we
yeah,
have to consider. And ideally, I guess I guess that's the merging, right, of biohacking and looking at ancestral knowledge and how they were doing things and trying to combine them in a balanced way,
yeah,
right?
yeah. I like that.
Instead
I
of going
like,
full on one or the other, kind of blending and yeah.
yeah, mixing.
Um, yeah, yeah. Well,
That's
that's
good.
cool. Yeah, I was going to ask you about the tours on your website, Bordeaux Kitchen. You have three things coming up, right? Is that
Yeah, yeah. So in July, I've got my little sort of follow in the footsteps of Weston A. Price in the Alps there. Yeah, I still have some spaces left if anyone's interested. It's sort of hiking and culinary. It's so beautiful up there. I just, it's my place that I go back to, or in my mind when I need a beautiful place to think of, and just where you replenish the air, the sun, um, the water. It's amazing. The
are,
cows.
are there a lot of springs that you drink from, I'd imagine, in that region or
Yeah, so it's
Mhm.
interesting because along the trails, they've got, well, and through the villages, there are 5 villages in this valley, and then there are little kind of groupings above which have, their outhouses, and they have their spring, they're kind of like a trough, and then a little I don't know, what do you call that? Just a faucet, and
Mhm.
it's always running, and you can fill up your bottle, and
Cool.
it's just so delicious and wonderful and refreshing and cold. Yeah, they have streams,
That's
and
cool.
yeah, get into the lakes, and so that's the one trip, and then and next year I'm planning a writer's thing, a workshop in Paris, just because I love Paris and I love writing in the cafes.
Cool.
And then Bordeaux after that, to meet, my French winemaking friends, which is kind of unique, I think. So yeah, it's exciting. I just love to share, share what I've learned, share my friends, have them meet each other, kind of an exchange of culture and ideas, and uh, opening, because some people just don't have any, or enough exposure to another culture like that. And it's just, and I know Bordeaux pretty well now, so it's just, one of those favorite places I like to go to and share.
That's super cool. Yeah, it sounds like
Yeah.
you're describing me because I furthest I've ever been was Baja, Mexico. And I have to, and now I have cat sitters, but I was just if things ever slow down with me building crazy stuff, then I could travel even
Yeah,
for a
yeah,
few days. I don't like being away from home for a while, but you can do short
sure.
trips, I guess. So
Yeah, yeah, I know it can be hard. It's hard. Um,
yeah.
but I like to go and visit friends and see how they're doing. So
Yeah.
anyway, maybe you'll come on a trip. You can teach us a few things.
Yeah. Yeah. That'd be awesome. Cool. Well, yeah, Tanya, this was so much fun. The BordeauxKitchen.com is your website. You have an awesome book, although it's kind of hard to find now, right? You were saying, or
Yeah, well, I'm looking for a publisher
yeah.
to print again.
Cool.
And hopefully I'll find a publisher for the new book, and maybe someone who wants to publish the first book again. So
Cool.
we'll see. Hopefully there'll be more copies available. I'd really love that, to be able to share that with everyone who wants it. So, but thank you so much for taking the time and chatting
No,
with me.
thank you.
And yeah, it's great to hear your ideas and the questions people have.
No, thank you. Yeah, it was really fun, and you really inspired me to get back into eating the actual hydrated raw liver, so I'm gonna
Oh,
get
great.
back on that.
All right.
So,
Excellent. That's great.
yeah, yeah, but yeah, thanks so much. And oh, and you're on social media as well. I guess that's all on your website too, and YouTube and all that stuff.
Yeah, you can
Your
click.
website.
You'll find me there.
Very cool.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank
It's
you,
really
Tanya.
nice.
Stick around as I close out the show. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed the show. I thought it was pretty cool that she still has her cycle in her early 50s. Clearly, she's doing some stuff right. It's funny because she's definitely like anti-repeat, which is a lot of snacking, regulating blood sugar with frequent meals and snacks. I know one guy that I blew up has changed his mind on that and changed his whole program and now doesn't recommend frequent snacking or 5, 6 meals a day like a lot of these people did. So it's great to see people changing their mind, and hopefully people do it in a very transparent way, unlike Paul Saladino that kind of hid his change from carnivore. It's really good to be upfront that you were wrong, that you changed your mind. That's what I try to do with this show all the time. And on the topic of repeat versus what Tanya was talking about, being against sugar and against frequent snacking, I really think it depends on the season of life. I know when I was super stressed, I probably would have crashed and burned if I didn't snack and eat frequently because my body was just consuming so much glucose to counter the intense stress, whether it be a relationship that I shouldn't have been in or an environment I shouldn't have been in. I know the worst health I was ever in is when I was fasting in a really stressful situation or season in my life. So definitely good to tune in and just see where you're at. Obviously, we're all different genetically, but we're also different with life circumstances. So I think for some people, snacking, eating frequently can be a game changer for their hormones and their life. But maybe for other people, limiting their carb intake for a short period of time and not snacking might be the best thing. I know I can say for me personally, since I bought this new acreage, the 100 acres that I'm on now, I have been fasting more than I'd like to. But what I've found is as long as I keep my fiber intake at a certain level and the raw carrot I still employ, I just grate it and eat it straight. That really lowers my stress. And it's something that I really feel. If I'm under eating fiber, I do feel that excess adrenaline effect. And that's one thing that I gleaned from my show. I think it was a year and a half ago or so with Karen Hurd on beans and how fiber soaks up excess adrenaline. That has proven to be very true for me time and time again, my experiments with fiber. So it's funny how, the anti-nutrients and the vegetables and the plants get demonized. I'm so happy to be growing my own fiber finally in my geodesic dome here on the property because, yes, all of the beneficial polyphenols and anti-cancer compounds and artery protecting compounds and all the benefits of vegetables are awesome, but the fiber is also awesome. And that's why I like raw vegetables and I feel incredible from them. The one thing I definitely agree on with Tanya is the power of organ meats. Liver definitely changed my life. Like I said during the show, I was inspired by her to get back to the real thing. And since I wasn't raised on it, I don't think there's anything wrong with cheating and freezing it, slicing it up into small pill-sized cubes, Ziploc bags, or whatever you want, Pyrex, whatever you choose. Freeze them and then thaw them out and just swallow them whole. That works great. And I encourage you to do that if you can find high quality grass-fed beef liver or elk liver or bison liver or venison or whatever you choose. It is truly a multivitamin. The selenium in there, the copper, the vitamin A. There's just so many incredible nutrients that a lot of people are deficient in that are present in liver. And if you don't want to do the real thing, you can do capsules. I've just seen it demonized lately by people selling organ meat powdered supplements, saying that you need to take 6 to 12 or 18. You're taking handfuls of pills to get the same amount that you would get in fresh liver. And I think what they're not realizing is if you're taking it consistently every day, like in the case of MitoLife beef liver, 6 capsules is a serving, and you're doing that daily, 7 days a week, it adds up, because usually with fresh liver, you're only eating it once a week. That's like the cadence that Ray Pete talked about. That's all that's needed is once a week liver consumption. So if you're taking the capsules daily or even every other day, you are going to match what you get from fresh liver. So it's great to interview people that I have disagreements with. It's a beautiful thing. A lot of other podcasts don't do that. They just set up, debates which go nowhere. I just like friendly discussions with people that have different opinions. But like I said, overall, Tania and I agree on a lot. And the power of animal foods, undeniable. So if you want to check out her work, even hang out with her on her tours, you can go to the Bordeaux Kitchen.com. That's BORDEAUX Kitchen.com. It's a great website, great skincare line. I'm excited to try her tallow products. And like I said, I use beeswax candles to light my dinner every night. I just use 2 of them. Usually throw something up on my laptop, a Rumble video interview or something like that. And it's a really enjoyable experience. My website is matt-blackburn.com. You can click on Go Rogue and see all of the previous podcast episodes with the show notes. And then if you click the shop tab, you see all of my recommended products. I know in about a month here, it will be warm enough to wear sandals again. So I'll probably be wearing my Earth Runner sandals most of the time on this property. I know definitely when it gets into the 80s and 90s, that's all I'll be wearing on my feet, which are the circadian sandals. They're grounded, and I've been using those for years. Really good idea, especially if you live in the mountains, in the forest. People have different opinions on when we should ground. My experience, grounding when you sleep is the most important, but if you can ground during the day as well, that's great. They're really affordable sandals. They're about $70. So check those out on my website. And then my products you can find at mitolife.co. I've had this brand for about 5 years now. I restarted it after I was selling algae oil, and that's a whole story for another show. But I relaunched the brand. I started it off with enzyme products, were my first products, systemic enzymes, digestive enzymes, Shilajit, vitamin E. Those were kind of the first ones that I came out with. And then I started to expand it to spore-based probiotics and magnesium and vitamin K2. And then recently in the last, let's say 2 years, I changed my mind on a lot of things about supplements, specifically just demonizing supplements. So I read into the power of zinc and ascorbic acid and how our tissues actually store vitamin C almost in the exact same form as ascorbic acid. It's called ascorbate, but there's just so much misinformation and noise out there in the health field where we get into these culty mentalities of demonizing different supplements. I've talked about this a lot, but the ones that I used to demonize were vitamin D, zinc, ascorbic acid. I would say it's not real vitamin C because real vitamin C is whole food vitamin C. And that's the mantra that a lot of confused health educators talk about, which is totally bogus and ridiculous and just scientifically false. And those supplements really changed my life, specifically the vitamin C and the zinc. for someone with a history of veganism, raw veganism, fruitarianism, like myself, zinc with ascorbic acid can really help to balance out the anxiety, which I'm genetically prone to. And my friend Willie said when he started megadosing vitamin C, even just short term, he found just an immediate grounded feeling because vitamin C helps with copper toxicity. And the culty people will say that it destroys ceruloplasmin, which I've had a show on. If you just search MitoLife Radio, ascorbic acid, you'll see me counter those arguments in a really grounded, evidence-based way. But it is true that vitamin C affects copper. And for people that weren't consuming a lot of zinc growing up, for me, the first 30 years of my life, barely any red meat whatsoever, that's where you get zinc. I was having a ton of copper coming in, no zinc to counter it. And I probably wasn't getting any vitamin C most days. So that's part of why I felt better on a raw vegan diet. I was finally getting vitamin C. I was probably affecting that ceruloplasmin if it was high, or just chelating excess copper. Huge missing piece. There's something to consider if you have a lot of neurological issues, mental, emotional stuff, and you have a history of plant-based. Zinc and ascorbic acid. Simple, cheap, it works. And then you stack on top of that, you do jellyfish collagen, elk velvet antler, beef liver. Of course, in the same vibe as the show with the nutrition. So obviously eating whole organ meats if you can find them, eating ruminant animals, butter, cheese, milk, raw milk, high quality dairy, all of that foundational stuff, all the lifestyle stuff, touching grass. People just talk about that a lot in the health community. So I just look at that as a given. I'll remind you guys, of course, to do that stuff, but there's not a lot of talk of supplements. And if there are, it's a lot of misinformed people just saying that whole food supplements are better, which is a really absolute statement to make. That might be true in certain situations, but the research doesn't lie with isolated lithium supplementation, with isolated ascorbic acid. You can't get up to the same dosage of grams of vitamin C with whole food vitamin C. Sure, you're getting polyphenols and other beneficial nutrients in like camu camu or acerola or whatever vitamin C supplement you're taking, but you're not going to get enough to counter EMFs. You're not going to get enough to counter the excess copper that you've had for decades. So just food for thought, things to think about. That's kind of a elevator pitch to my philosophy on human health. If you want to dive into that deeper, check out MitoLife on Instagram, Matt Blackburn on Instagram. We're posting pretty much daily on there, so you can get a lot of free information from that social media platform. And at the buzzer, I almost forgot to mention on Tania's website, if you want to try her skincare products from Etsy, use the discount code Blackburn and you'll save 10% on the first order only. She was gracious to share that with us. If you've been curious about tallow skincare, Blackburn on her Etsy shop, and you'll save 10% on her products. So that is all. I'll see you guys next Friday. Stay supercharged and stay rogue.